Okay guys, welcome back to another episode of Rotten Reviews. On this episode I'm going to take a look at the 2014 movie Lucy with Scarlett Johansson. It has a 67% on the tomato meter and a 47% on the audience score. Of course that makes it okay by the critics, but rotten from the audience point of view. I'm going to argue that, yeah, it deserves to be rotten, but it's still enjoyable. It particularly falls apart in the end. It's a great premise. It had me hooked. It had me wanting to see this movie. I didn't see this in the theater. I saw this on DVD release. And I thought it was great until it, I don't know, devolved into the realm of magic, so to speak. It has a great premise. A woman is exposed to some kind of super drug which has her using more than the normal human amount of her brain capacity. It has her, taking advantage of that often misquoted scientific fact that we're not fully using all of our brain's capacity. People argue about, what that means, and the public perception is, of course, that if we could use all of our brain's capacity, we would be, in effect, somehow superpowered, at least intellectually. That's not exactly true from what scientists say, but it makes an interesting premise regardless, that exposure to some kind of drug could turn a regular person into a superhero. So, we've explored that on Limitless, for example, and that's a movie and a TV show, and I liked that premise as well. Now, it really falls apart when it goes from having, a super genius mental capacity into the main character actually becoming a superhero, a time traveler, a kind of practitioner of all kinds of magic. The film doesn't actually say that there's any limit to this, and it just keeps upping the ante and upping the abilities of the main character, and it definitely crosses into the realm of magic, and that's where it let me down and it fell apart for me. But otherwise, I really enjoyed this, particularly the beginning parts. And the ending, I would say the ending is kind of a letdown. It seems to come too soon. The movie seems too short, and it doesn't really leave us with a message of any type. It kind of ends with the protagonist becoming godlike and actually even physically transforming into a god and kind of dematerializing into a godlike realm or a state of being God. It wasn't very satisfying because you were along for the ride, certainly, but it didn't have, a payoff at the end. It didn't have something for you to think about at the end. And of course, it was another film in which Morgan Freeman is largely wasted. I've seen him in other films in which he was barely used, in particular the movie Transcendence with Johnny Depp. He was criminally underused in that movie. I guess he had been used only to get his name onto the credits. But in this case, he is actually used more, but he's used barely at all. He's a scientist character that is consulted by the character of Lucy, and he is just about criminally underused in this, and it's very disappointing because Morgan Freeman has so much to offer, and yet he offered this film very little. It wasn't his fault, but the script just didn't have much for him to do. Now let's move on into the actual audience reviews and find out, as of even 4 days ago in 2019, how relative this movie is and whether people hate it, love it, or they agree with the 47% rating on the audience score. So right off the bat, we have a 5-star review. Love Lucy. It's one of those flicks you can watch over and over again. It's sci-fi eye candy sprinkled with pondering thoughts about consciousness, time, and evolution. Definitely worthy of 90 minutes of your time. I'll disagree right off the bat. It's not 5 stars. I would give it a solid 2 stars. It could peak out in parts at 2.5 stars, but since it didn't explain the logic or give me some kind of logical rule to her powers, and I didn't appreciate the ending, I'm going to say that it doesn't quite touch all the way into 2.5 stars. If I could give it like 2 and 3/8 stars, I would, but let's just say 2 stars. And yeah, it gives you a kind of a hints about a message on evolution. and it's got some imagery that definitely wants to tell you something about evolution, but it doesn't quite get there. It's not coherent enough at the end, and it's not foreshadowed at the beginning of the film, certainly, so there's no real actual message here, in my opinion. 3 stars. Overambitious but very entertaining. Yeah, it was entertaining until it went into magic, and then I would agree overambitious because it tried to say it had something to tell us about evolution, but it didn't actually get there. 3.5 stars. It has a few problems in terms of context and knowledge, but god damn it, it's so entertaining you'll be wanting more. Yeah, you are left wanting more. It seems to end too quickly. If the running time is indeed 90 minutes, then they could have used another 20 minutes to better characterize perhaps Morgan Freeman's role in this and to give us a real message. It seemed very short. It seemed to end almost dissatisfyingly short. 90 minutes is not too short for a film, but in the way they did it left me feeling that I didn't get something that they could have just put in with some more running time. That's my thought on it. I was a little bit disappointed. 2.5 stars, not English. 5 stars. I really appreciate how she became a god. Loved it. Well, yeah, she became a god, but we didn't feel enough for her or her struggle to get to being a god. She just gradually got these powers and became more and more powerful to a level that was magical, and then she became a god, and it seemed to happen so fast that it wasn't satisfying. She didn't really struggle. I mean, yes, she struggled to escape her captors at the beginning, but after that, once she started getting these powers, it was all so simple and so quickly, her transformation. It wasn't even a challenge for her to become a god. And that was disappointing. I wanted to see more of a struggle, wanted to see more about what she was about, but we really didn't get that. She was very shallow, surface level. We just didn't have enough information to feel sympathy for her, but she became a god very quickly, too quickly. 2.5 stars. A boring, shallow feminist ripoff of Limitless. Scarlett Johansson couldn't act to save her life. Her wooden and emotionless acting made this movie even worse. She is such an overrated actress. She has no range and has blank facial expressions like she usually does in action movies. Rating 4.2 out of 10. I'll agree with some of that. It is not exciting because I don't think it's Scarlett Johansson herself. I think it's because we don't get to see who her character really is, and she has no real challenge after she starts to get these powers. She's just tossing people out of her way, and she becomes a god, and nothing really stops her or gets in that way. So it's just unsatisfying. As far as her being wooden and emotionless in this movie, and that she does this often, no, I'll disagree. It's the script. A lot of her roles, including as Black Widow in the Marvel movies, it's not that Scarlett Johansson doesn't have a range as an actress. It's just that the scripts they give her don't let her show anything beyond her action movie persona. It's kind of like it's what the directors of these movies want. They're telling her what to do, and she's doing it. She's capable of a lot more, but again, she's most well known for playing Black Widow in the Marvel movies, and it's almost like she's typecast as that now. 2.5 stars. A Limitless clone done poorly. Performances are good. Yeah, again, you're going to see a lot of comparisons to Limitless with Bradley Cooper. That was a little bit different, had a different tone. Limitless had a main protagonist that was a regular type of guy, even kind of a screw-up, and a super drug made him a genius, and it had more of a story, a plot going on behind that too. It was very well done. I enjoyed it even more than this, of course. Now, in this one, we just have the premise that a tourist is, she's taken hostage, maybe human trafficking, and she gets exposed to this drug, and it gives her powers, but that is very shallow. We don't get any more of the backstory of the villains. There is no big bad, and even if there was, she becomes powerful so quickly that she could just brush it aside. It wouldn't matter. I wouldn't say this is a clone because this is a very shallow exploration of the same theme. It's not attempting to be a clone. If it was a clone, then this movie would be much higher. It wouldn't be 47% on the audience score. In fact, if this had been a clone of Limitless, I probably would have considered this 3 stars or above. but it's not. 3 stars. It's a cool concept and I love the ending for ironic reasons, but this mostly fails at presenting a likable protagonist and three-dimensional characters overall. It was fun though. Yeah, I'll agree it was fun. There wasn't any part of this that wasn't fun. But yeah, we needed to see characters that weren't completely shallow, that had some kind of story that we could sympathize better with them. They were very shallow characters. Morgan Freeman's was completely cardboard scientist. Lucy. Now it's a bad thing in a movie when your main protagonist that the movie is named after, you don't really know who she is. That's a problem in this movie. So I agree, it's shallow. 5 stars. Surprisingly entertaining and compelling movie with a great leading role by Scarlett Johansson. Great idea, perfectly built up and worked out. Great action scenes too. No, you're being way too kind. We don't want just action. We want actual characterizations of the protagonist and a characterization of some kind of villain or antagonist. We didn't really get that. She just became super powerful very quickly, and it didn't leave you satisfied at the end. 3.5 stars. The movie should have been a superhero movie, and if you start watching it like one, you're going to see one of the best. Really, the movie structure is so similar to an origin superhero movie that the not logical science fits perfectly or properly. But then the movie ends like it has always been a philosophical consideration about existence, and it fails in that. Anyway, there is something very special about the first act of the movie. Besson shows us what the movie is going to be about during the cleverly written scene of, well, yeah, the movie starts as a comic book type superhero origin story, and then at the end it tries to have some philosophical thing to say about human evolution, and it doesn't work. In 90 minutes it doesn't work because we don't have enough information to make something meaningful like that at the end. It's almost like you're trying to do two different things. Maybe there were two different writers and one wrote the beginning and one wrote the end, but it didn't work. It couldn't carry this out of the rotten range. That's why I think it does deserve the 47%. 5 stars. This movie was amazing. Y'all hating. No, it started off amazing as a comic book origin story, yes, but it tried to be something else at the end, and that's why people are hating on it, so to speak. 2.5 stars. Cool concept, but in the end, a bit underwhelming. Perhaps more emotional heart would make this movie better. Yeah, I wouldn't call it emotional heart. I would just call it better characterization of, in particular, Lucy and of Morgan Freeman, scientist. If just those two characters were fleshed out better, it would have been fine. 5 stars. Very great movie with a very fresh subject. Don't know why it got so less rated. Well, I told you why. 2 stars. This movie is a mess and I didn't enjoy it. Yeah, it's a mess because it's trying to do two different things. If you want a superhero movie, it's great until the end. If you want a philosophical movie, it kind of sucks until the very end. Either way, you're dissatisfied. 1.5 stars. It kept making excuses for the fantastical. If it kept out all the Morgan Freeman parts and everything that tries to make it science rather than just fiction, it would be easier to enjoy. I'll agree. It seems to take itself very seriously. This is so close to real life, yet it's so over the top, the fifth element seems more realistic. Yeah, she has magical powers. It's great when she's just super smart. It's great when she can outthink everybody. But then once it crosses into the realm where she can wave her hands and materialize and dematerialize things, like she's in the Matrix, like she's suddenly Neo in the Matrix after he's fully evolved, that's a little ridiculous because how does this come from just having brain powers? Now, if it had stopped with like telepathy, or if it had just stopped with telepathy and telekinesis, okay, sure, that's been done many times before and we can easily believe that. But then it goes into just flat out the Matrix type stuff where, she's just hand waving and forming things out of her thoughts. And that's just not going to come from some drug that you injected into somebody's brain. I'm sorry. That's too much for the audience to suspend their disbelief. Unless you were in a straight up like comic book story, like Guardians of the Galaxy type, and this was all set up from the beginning. But we're not. We're on Earth in the modern time, and we're supposed to take this 100% seriously, and that's a big problem. You can't suspend your disbelief once you cross into the realm of total magic, and that's where it fell apart for me too. 3 stars. All knowledge in the hands of one person using 100% of our brain, but it also gives us supernatural powers. A movie with many action scenes needs unnecessary, without much feeling, with an original plot, but that in the end is quite boring. Yeah, it crosses into supernatural or magic, and she has no real difficulties. Once she gets her powers, nothing stands in her way, so there's nothing for her to overcome. That's why you get the boring feeling, because it all just becomes her becoming powerful. And how is this exciting? How is there tension? There is no tension, because once she gets her magic powers, what's going to stop her? Nothing, of course. So where's the story, right? 1 star. Lucy has a message it wants to speak. Scarlett Johansson always gives a good performance, but the movie is weird and unorganized. It's like they pulled a homeless man off the street, obsessed with superheroes, and hired him to write the screenplay. Yeah, it's like it devolves from just like she's overpowered to straight up magic. She can do magic. Yeah, it's, you just can't suspend your disbelief like that. 2 stars. I didn't quite like this movie. It felt like an emotionless action movie without much excitement. Yeah, you'll say it has no excitement because she's just so easily overcomes everything. That's why there's no excitement. 1.5 stars. Started off strong, the first 15 minutes, and then slowly starts to cave in on itself. The ending is terrible. Yeah, I agree 100%. It's very short synopsis there, but I agree. Half a star. Glad I didn't pay to see it. Too weird. Yeah, I'll agree. If I had seen this in the theater, knowing what the trailer was promising me, and then it ended the way it did, and I had paid money to see it, yeah, I would have been really disappointed, because I would have been dissatisfied. And I saw this for free, basically, so it wasn't any skin off my nose. It didn't insult me because I didn't pay. But I was still dissatisfied at the end. 2.5 stars. Basically a watered down Matrix. Scarlett does the best she can, but it's clearly inspired by one of the greatest films ever made. It had some interesting concepts, but required too much exposition. Yeah, she turned into Neo from the Matrix, literally, and that was just a step too far, right? Because that's not what the movie started off as. Half a star. Of every sci-fi movie I have ever watched, this has to be the worst. Upon consumption of CPH4, she starts to gain some powers. At 70%, she is vomiting energy, and at 90%, she is traveling through time, and at 100%, you guessed it right, she becomes a pen drive, a pen drive. This isn't a joke, that's the actual movie. And why is she doing all of this? For humanity, of course. If you can ignore the so-called science in this movie, maybe it has some decent action sequences, but that's about it. Yeah, that this reviewer is correct. Once she gains 100% of her total brain capacity, she reaches her maxed out, her max power level, so to speak, video game wise. She transforms herself into a USB drive, and you know, basically leaves it for people to have all of human knowledge and all of scientific knowledge in her form, all packaged up in a USB drive that they can, I don't know, plug into a computer and go and invent nice things from it. That's the way this movie ends. She literally turns herself into a USB drive as her gift to humanity. So yeah, the reviewer is correct, and it sounds even worse than it looks. The CGI in which this scene happens at the end, it actually looks pretty cool. But again, yeah, that's where this ends. Half a star. A few too many lapses. Intellectual scientific cell discussion, a crock. Yeah, it goes from just kind of trying to explain this scientifically to just flat out giving her Matrix Neo powers. Magic. 5 stars. One of the best action thrillers I've seen. This movie and Scarlett's performance were so underrated. It was a movie that came out ahead of its time. Dumb people could not like it or get the idea behind it. Well, I guess I'm dumb. But it's not that dumb people just couldn't get it or get the idea. We got it. I got this perfectly. I got the idea. I got what it was trying to do. I got everything that happened in the plot. It wasn't over my head, but it just didn't do it right. It didn't deliver a message. Yes, I understand that Scarlett Johansson's character, she packaged up all of the knowledge that humanity could possibly have into a thumb drive made up of herself and presented it to the scientist as a gift to humanity. I understand that, but it wasn't satisfying because we didn't know who this character was from the start. We didn't get a sense of her struggle. We didn't get a sense of where she was trying to go. We didn't get any big bad villain to overcome. And it was basically boring. And it also tried to make some kind of statement about evolution, and it didn't give us a coherent message, even though it was obvious it was trying. So no, it's not just that people were too dumb. It's that actually the opposite. They understood everything it was trying to do, but everything it was trying to do was completely unsatisfying. So let's move on. 1 star. We're still in 2019 on the reviews, so obviously this movie is quite relevant still. 1 star. A movie for dummies. Also, there wasn't many cool fighting scenes because of Lucy's powers. Nevertheless, the pace of the action was good, so I'll give it at least 1 star for not being slow and boring. Yeah, it was definitely fast-paced, but the problem is she just went from regular human to superhero to god in a very fast pace, and she had no obstacles. And yeah, there wasn't a lot of cool fighting scenes past the first 15 minutes because once she got her actual powers, it wasn't necessary for her to get into a fight with anybody anymore. She could just hand wave and dematerialize you if she wanted. So yeah, this reviewer is 100% correct. 5 stars. You'll be hooked just like me. No, I don't think so. I don't believe you. 1 star. This movie is honestly so bad in just about every way that it's hard to find a place to start. They try to get logical and sciencey, and yet the movie doesn't use any logic or have their main character, the title of the movie in fact, use any common sense at all whatsoever, even though she's supposed to be an all-knowing being. And any science, if they use, sounds completely absurd and made up. They honestly ruin what could have been a pretty interesting premise. Yeah, they give us like a comic book movie with the science kind of being, you're supposed to kind of hand wave a lot of it away, which is fine in a comic book origin story movie, but then they want us to take it serious as she turns into Neo from the Matrix, and they want us to really feel something serious and emotional when she tries to make it into a philosophical gift to humankind at the end. Yeah, it doesn't work. 2 stars. Easily the most divisive movie of the decade. Oh, no, no, no. This is a review from 2019. This is not divisive. If you want to talk about Star Wars, The Last Jedi, okay. This is not a divisive movie. So anyway, I'm going to continue. One that I did not like. Lucy offers us nice visuals and plenty of thought, but everything else is a mess. The plot was false, stupid, and cliched. The screenplay was repetitive, uninspired, and boring. Performances that were bland and generic, with a conclusion that was ridiculous, odd, and just plain bad. I highly recommend you watch something else, then drive all your interest in watching this film into a ditch. Yeah, exactly. It was like false, stupid, and cliched. Sure, that would have worked in a comic book story, but then it expected us to take it all serious. Yeah, so I'll largely agree. 3 stars. Movie leaves you with the feeling of extremely science fiction, which is the opposite intention. I kind of get what they're trying to say. It's trying to, give us some kind of science fiction that we can take serious. But no, it's like fantasy, more fantastical than The Matrix, believe it or not. The Matrix actually had an explanation for Neo's powers. This one has no explanation. 3.5 stars. A fundamental yet irreverent irony undergirds Lucy. In order to accept the inconceivable, extraordinary level of brilliance reached by the... Okay, I'm not even going to go through this word salad. It's not worth it. Let's move on. 1.5 stars. Started out promising, but became ridiculous halfway through. Yeah. 0.5 star. LOL. Main protagonist is so overpowered. She also comes off as super cheesy. Yeah. Talk about overpowered. It's like people say, for example, in The Last Jedi that the character of Rey was overpowered. She was a Mary Sue. No, this character in this movie is the true Mary Sue once she gets her powers. She's just like the biggest, baddest of all time, and she doesn't have any obstacles. That makes for a very, very dull story and a very dull ending. 5 stars. I loved the movie and I want a sequel. Well, I think it could be redone by somebody else at some point in time with an actor that's or actress that's just as capable. And but again, people would just call it a limitless ripoff, right? So you're going to have to give this another decade before you do it again, at least unless it's really different than this, because this one already was called a limitless ripoff. So okay, the next one's just going to be called a limitless ripoff for the reason that the Limitless movie just actually had a good story and it made sense. I mean, it wasn't, realistic, but the plot and the real world elements, it kept you gripped and it worked, right? So, no, I disagree. If you want to make a sequel to this, wait like 10 years. 3 stars. Was an okay film. Tried to be profound and preach atheism, however, which was a fail. Yeah, you could say that. It was, giving you an evolutionary science message at the end. But, this was mixed with magic. So the only thing it could have done worse is to throw aliens in there too. It didn't do that. That would have been the only thing that it could have done more over the top than what it did. 5 stars, let it take you for a ride. Okay. 3 stars, the visuals and Johansson's performance is solid most of the time in Lucy, and while too stupid for its own good, there is some potential on this concept. Sure, I'll agree. Limitless had the same stuff going on. It carried it out very well. Bradley Cooper's character did not become a god. He did not have superpowers. That could work, though. You see, it's not the fact that Lucy got superpowers. It's just that the movie didn't foreshadow that and set that up with some kind of logic. And powers actually need some kind of limit, some kind of rule set to them. There wasn't in this movie. She just kept getting more powerful until she turned into a god. And that doesn't work in a comic book sense either. 3.5 stars. Awesome movie. I can't tell what it tries to be because it switches between two kinds of movies really bad. It puts a lot up in the air but doesn't really do anything with it, and it is at its worst in the end. Good premise but not perfectly brought to life. Yeah, I'll largely agree, but I don't know why you're giving this 3.5 stars. You've just described a 2-star movie or worse. So that puzzles me. 4 stars. I do not know how people did not like this movie. It was so amazing. Well, most people do like it. It's just they don't find it believable or logical or satisfying in the end. But most people had fun watching it. I had fun watching it. I just felt that it failed at the end. That's all. 3 stars. Nothing special, just for entertainment. Okay, sure. It works like that. Like I said, it's a fun movie. I don't think it deserves lower than a 47%. In fact, it could have a 50%. I just say it's still rotten. It doesn't deserve to be not rotten. But yeah, 50% even is fair for this. It's still fun. 4.5 stars. Did I like this movie or did I like the way Scarlet looked? I will never know. Yeah, that's debatable. You could say that about her character in some of the Avengers movies too. Mostly she was there to look badass and be appealing in different ways, and she was. 3 stars. It was okay, interesting, but not a must-see. 2.5 stars. Strengths. Scarlett Johansson, Lucy Miller, is often a very strong part of any movie she works in. That was the case here, as she plays the title character with a charm and sense of intrigue. She nails the little ticks you might expect from someone going through these changes and losing more of her empathetic capabilities. Many of the visuals are great. The effects team made phenomenal use of the $40 million budget. Everything looked cool. The action sequences were also mostly well done. Yeah, so you're saying basically what I said. This movie is fun, but 2.5 stars, yeah, that's the highest it goes because it's just still disappointing at the end. 1 star. This movie was terrible. Scarlett Johansson was terrible. In the opening scene when she's supposedly scared, it was terrible acting. Don't waste your time with this movie. I score it a 1%. I disagree with that. Her acting wasn't any better or worse than what she did in the Marvel movies or in anything else I've seen her in. It's just you didn't care for the premise and you probably didn't care for the opening scene, right? It kind of came across as it could have been a superhero origin movie. And it was completely fine by that standard. So I disagree with 1 star. It's worth 2 stars. It's fun. 2 stars. Initially very excited by the cast and potential of the storyline, the pacing quickly felt off, looping between fast action and slow filler material. Towards the end, it goes astray and takes a downhill turn, becoming ridiculous and incomprehensible. Scarlett Johansson acts well, but I'd like to have seen more of Choi Min-sik, who is phenomenal in Old Boy, and I Saw the Devil. Lucy leaves a lot of unanswered questions, but I truthfully felt uninterested in finding deeper meaning by the end credits. Well, I probably butchered that Asian name. They're saying that I guess one of the bad guy villains was also in Old Boy. I'm going to be talking about Old Boy too because that's the subject of another Rotten review. Old Boy I found more entertaining than this movie, if you want to make that comparison. This movie, it's just like it didn't quite reach something that's memorable. Half a star, an absolute disaster with abysmal acting. Even Freeman is totally apathetic. Idiotic story, pseudo-scientific, new age blathering, pontificating, and whiny idea, and always lifeless, dull, mind-numbingly talentless, and lethally boring Johansson. Literally, the only good thing about this heap of manure is the final credits song by Damon Albarn. Yeah, this is a person that's really not a fan of Scarlett Johansson. I don't think she's that bad. It's just she's been put in a lot of roles in which she doesn't do a whole lot of range. I mean, she's kind of stuck in this range. Again, that's not her. That's just the way she's been cast. 5 stars. Life after life, no lie without truth. Not really sure. I guess the reviewer's trying to like put some kind of new age philosophy to this movie. It could be, except the movie doesn't really give you any more of a coherent message than that line right there in this review does. So I'll agree, but not with the 5 stars. 2 stars. This movie is an incoherent mess. I almost can't even believe a movie could be this bad. No, there are far worse movies. I've talked about many of them, but I'll agree it's 2 stars. 5 stars. I can't take this trailer seriously after watching Ryan Higa's on Boxy Software. I don't know what Boxy Software is, and I could care less, just so you know. 5 stars. It is a revelation for some. Who is Lucy? That is correct. This film can be decoded by the information provided by John Lamb Lash, especially in the Geian Navigation Experiment and the Mandela Effect Decoded, both provided without charge on the internet. I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't want to end it on that mess of a review, so I'm going to read a few more. 1 star. Probably the worst sci-fi movie I've ever seen. Nah, don't agree. 4 stars. I love Scarlett. I love Luc Besson movies. Mix it together and voila. A movie I'd watch more than once. I like this one. Not 4 stars, though. 2 stars. Can't be fun. Don't bring your brain or ask any questions at all. And it should be good enough to avoid doing laundry. Yeah, I would choose this over laundry, so it's not a total loss. 1 star. Did I see a different movie to my fellow reviewers? Have just watched this movie for the first time and found the enjoyable moments few and far between. The concept is deeply flawed, story desperately predictable, and feel that the only point for recommendation is that it features Scarlett Johansson. So basically they're saying they like her, but they don't like the movie. Yeah, I'll agree with what they're saying on the movie. It's deeply flawed. It's not, you can't take it serious, especially when it goes into full-on Matrix mode. But 1 star, no, it's a little bit too much fun for that. I'd give it 2 stars. 2.5 stars. Drug that makes you become God. Cool. Yeah, that is a cool concept. If you gave me just the flat-out premise that, this drug that you take, it will lead to you becoming a god, okay, great, but let's do it the right way. Let's have a character that we sympathize with, that we know something about, that is struggling along the way. But we didn't get that. We just got literally a drug that turned Lucy into a god, and she had no trouble becoming a god, and, that's not that exciting. 4.5 stars. Excellent film by Luc Besson. Visually stunning, action-packed, thought-provoking. Scarlett Johansson knocks Lucy out of the park. It's not all that, but 2 stars, sure. 5 stars, Luc Besson did it again. I'm not really that familiar with Luc Besson, but apparently he's got fanboys out there. And there may be posters of him on people's walls. Maybe he's a director that's got his own posters. Who knows? 3 stars. Blending action and philosophy is pretty hard to do, but Lucy, for the most part, succeeds at getting some interesting points across. All that with gunfights, and for a mainstream sci-fi movie, it's quite gory. The production values are polished, and both Morgan Freeman and especially Scarlett Johansson gives pretty good performances, with Choi Min-sik from I Saw the Devil, 2010, gives a good one too. But it's weird how a big budget flick like this only has a pretty short runtime. Yeah, I'll agree. Again, it felt too short. Um, it should have done a little bit more, and it should have used some more runtime to do it. It felt very short. Like it just ended, and it almost felt like, I saw half a movie. 5 stars. One of the best Scarlett Johansson movies. Yeah, maybe, but I don't know. I haven't watched the ones where she's just the main point of it. I wouldn't call the Avengers movies Scarlett Johansson movies. So I don't know on that one. It could be, but again, I haven't seen a movie with just her as the main focal point of the movie. So I don't know. 3 stars. It's entertaining. Visually, it's beautiful, and there are good ideas, but the scenario is pretty bad. The character does not act as it should according to the digest of the film. The film focuses a lot on this character and leaves no room for parallel intrigues that could have energized the film, avoiding scenes of Bull actions. Who's writing this stuff? It's like English, but English, they're trying to choose the words that are most obscure of all. Why do that? I don't know. Let me continue. Still a good entertainment and does not contain embarrassing scenes for the family. Yeah, it's not like something to be embarrassed at watching in a family setting, but I'll agree with this reviewer. There is no struggle. The main protagonist, Lucy, she has no trouble becoming a god, so there's nothing to root for. There's nothing for her to have a setback. There's no big bad villain to thwart her or to counterbalance against her. So as a superhero movie, it fails, because a superhero movie, even Superman has to have some kind of big bad to fight. Otherwise, it's completely a bore fest, right? So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to say this deserves its 47% audience score. I don't know how it got 67% on the tomato meter. I don't know how, because usually the critics will just utterly destroy this type of movie. You would expect a tomato meter score of like 7%. So I'm going to go down. I don't usually do this. I'm going to go down, take a look at what these critics said, and I'm going to look at these positive ones and find out why they didn't just pan this, right? So let's look at this. Let it grab you by the noodle and zap you into its whacked out vision of human existence. Okay, so one reviewer is saying just don't think about it too hard. Besson is a keen pilferer of anything that's looked good in other people's movies. Okay, so another vote for the director. Who remembers the last good Luc Besson movie? Time to reset that particular clock, as he's returned with a stormer. Okay, so we've got a bunch of critics that are Luc Besson fans. Okay. Lucy is not about to win any prizes from Mensa, but this isn't quite like any other blockbuster you'll see. Okay. It is confidently dumb, defiantly moronic, and a fine way to spend 90 minutes of time before doing something of value. This undeniably silly but raucously entertaining off-the-wall transhumanist actioner is an absolute riot. Really? See, I don't get where the critics are coming from here. Lucy is not a game-changing science fiction movie. Still, it represents the return of Luc Besson. Okay, these are just Luc Besson fans, these critics. Really, that's what's going on here. So that explains why this movie was not just ripped apart like every other movie in this genre would have been by the critics. So that 67% tomato meter score is simply just fans of the director. Okay, fine. But this is like 47 to 50% rotten. Just to be honest, so expect a good time. Don't expect a good movie. It's nothing memorable, but worth one watch, certainly. And I'm going to leave that here, and I will see you again on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.